Do you believe that the Bible and modern-day Israel are linked? Is God somehow involved in the nationhood of the Jewish people? Should Christians and Jews support the modern nation of Israel? If so, we should discuss a few key terms that are popular in the news today and how they relate to the Bible. This should shed some light on whether or not Bible-believing people have a duty to speak up on behalf of the modern nation of Israel. We will talk about the biblical land of Judea and Samaria. This region is at the very core of Israel's biblical identity. This is where Abraham lived, this is where Jacob dreamed, and this is where Joshua declared the Jewish nation after 400 years of slavery. This is also where the greatest battle for Israel's claim to the Holy Land is being fought today. The world press and international politicians talk a lot about 67 borders, a West Bank, and illegal Israeli settlements in Palestinian lands. The territories known as the West Bank are defined by what many call the 67 borders and are today seen as bargaining chips to be used during peace negotiations. This modern lingo needs to be understood in relevant historical and biblical terms if the Bible is to have a direct impact on our view of modern politics. What many call the West Bank is, simply put, Judea and Samaria. The 67 borders are a recent armistice line with a short political history and no biblical precedents. To grasp the identity of Judea and Samaria is a key to understanding Israel's biblical identity. The narrative of the promised people starts with Abraham. Living in what is now modern-day Iraq, Abraham left his home to resettle, as the Bible puts it, in a land that God would show him. This special land was promised to him and to his descendants as an inheritance. The promise was first pronounced as he stood on Elon Moreh, overlooking the Moreh Valley. He continued down to camp on the hills between Ai and Bethel and ended up buying land in Hebron. While he journeyed the land, God repeated to Abraham how he would inherit the land. Abraham eventually died and was buried with his wife Sarah in Hebron. Abraham passed the inheritance on to Isaac, and Isaac passed it on to Jacob. God confirmed the promise again to Jacob and granted him a heavenly vision of angels coming and going from heaven. God declared that he and his descendants would inherit the very land he lay upon, and that they would spread east, west, north, and south. Jacob also bought land up north in Shechem, but was buried with his fathers in Hebron. Now these locations are important: Elon Moreh, Shechem, Bethel, Hebron. It gets better. After surviving a generation in the wilderness, Moses sent Joshua into the promised land. Joshua and his men crushed Jericho and Ai. He then led the tribes up to Shechem, where the 12 tribes were gathered together for a declaration of the union between the people and the land, thus consummating the promise God made to Abraham. After this ceremony, the priests continued down to a place called Shiloh. There they settled a tabernacle into a permanent house of worship to God. It served as a spiritual capital there for nearly 370 years. Let's look at these places on the map again: Elon Moreh, Shechem, Shiloh, Bethel, Hebron. Now let's add the modern borders of Israel. Now let's add the 1949 armistice line that many call the 67 border. Now we see that most of these historical locations are in disputed territory. In other words, the legal right to the land is in question. But it should be obvious by now that this land has a profound biblical heritage. For interest's sake, let's look a little closer at the history of the armistice line itself. The Kingdom of Transjordan took control of Judea and Samaria in 1948. Transjordan, along with 6 other Arab armies, attacked the new state of Israel with the stated goal of liberating the Arabs who had come under Israeli political control. Many understood this as a blatant attempt to eliminate the budding Jewish state. Israel defended itself and repulsed the attack, forcing a ceasefire in 1949, leaving Transjordan in control of Judea and Samaria. Transjordan decided that its newly acquired lands were now to be labeled as the West Bank. This is how the term came into use. The Arab League members never recognized Jordan's claim to Judea and Samaria, and declared emphatically that the 1949 armistice lines were strictly a military necessity and not to be considered political borders. 18 years later, Jordan and its allies postured again to attack Israel, sparking off the 1967 war. Israel preempted her enemies, won a swift victory, and took control of Judea and Samaria. This short review serves to underline that the land has been in dispute since the withdrawal of British influence and the declaration of Israel's statehood in 1948. Supporting a peaceful, stable Judea and Samaria under Israeli control is not a wild and cold-hearted idea. Both Jew and Arab can live together in peace. This disputed and contested territory is truly the heartland of Israel and the root of her inheritance. Let's look at the locations again on the map. If we throw out the Bible, it's time to simply let politicians and lawyers argue all these issues out. And if they can't solve the dispute, then let the armies decide the difference. But for those who believe in the dusty old book of promises, a few key questions must be answered. Did God not swear Judea and Samaria to a returning remnant of Israel? Can we hold the Bible as truth and suggest that Israel give away Judea and Samaria? We can close the Bible and declare that God is not concerned with what belongs to whom in the Middle East. But that would be a denial of what has been clearly written. Whatever our personal inclinations, we must be clear. Judea and Samaria have been declared as a portion of Israel's inheritance. The Bible attests to this truth without apology, and what we do with that fact is up to us.